Well, it's 100% fire drill all day here at Crowdsource The Truth. We got John Cullen's Las Vegas investigation coming up at 6:30 p.m. on patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com on both of those channels. People should check out Subscribestar if they're having any technical or other problems with Patreon, and John's going to be joining us in just a moment. There's a lot to cover. I think people know that John has done extensive work researching possible Saudi connections in the Las Vegas shooting, a theory that I find to be gaining strength all the time. John, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Jason. I'm having a hard time hearing your audio a little bit. It sounds a little distant. I'm not sure if the audience is hearing what I'm hearing.
No,
I'm hearing
they're
a fair
not.
amount of noise.
You know what? It's something that we're going to have to address when we switch over to the sponsor exclusive. I don't have the microphone set on Skype, but everybody's hearing me normally through my normal microphone, and it's good to see you, John. People who were watching David Hawkins' Discovery CSI just a few moments ago are aware that I've just returned from the United Kingdom, and man, are my arms tired.
I hear you.
It's a stupid joke. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out, John, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm utilizing some newer technology this week, and we are appearing in full high-res HD at twice the normal bit rate. So we're in a little bit of an experimental phase here. People should be enjoying better image quality. I don't want to make sure everybody's getting proper, smooth playback. And we're going to be talking today about a possible thread, a through line in the Saudi Naval Base attack, the shooting that took place in Pensacola, Florida, a town where I lived when I was 1 year old. And, of course, the Las Vegas shooting. You've got some new information for us. We're going to also address some questions and concerns that viewers had about last week's show, but why don't you give us an overview of what we're going to be discussing at 6:30?
Sure. Well, it's been about a month since the Pensacola shooting, and I wanted to take a closer look at what have we learned in that last month. What has the FBI shared with the public? There's some news this week that the FBI once again is going to Apple and is looking to Apple to open up a couple of iPhones. It seems that there's two iPhones that appear to have belonged to the shooter, or supposedly. And so once again, FBI is asking Apple to open them up. I think in this case, Apple's going to cooperate because the person's dead and appears to have been a terrorist. So.
But wasn't that the same case last time, John? Wasn't it also San Bernardino guy was dead and he was a terrorist?
Yes. For some reason, that seemed more controversial, and I don't remember why, to tell you the truth. I don't recall why that was more controversial about Apple opening up the phone. But once again, it's the same story. They want access to the phone, and I guess the encryption is good enough to keep them out. So once again, FBI
It's
is looking
interesting.
to get in.
I've spoken about this because this same matter came up in the Mueller investigation of Dr. Jerome Corsi. And Dr. Corsi spoke during the Citizens Grand Jury, told us that the FBI was specifically interested in a conversation he had had with Ted Malloch, an American economics professor working in Oxford, and they were interested because the conversation took place on FaceTime. And this really sort of set off a light bulb over my head, because when I was in Dubai, shooting the ride film Daydreams of Dubai, the last stereoscopic film that I directed, my phone fell into a dolphin tank, and I went to the mall in Dubai to purchase another iPhone, and right on the box it said, FaceTime disabled in hardware. You cannot use FaceTime in Dubai, and I presume it's because of strong encryption. So the FBI seems to have the same issue as Sheikh Maktoum.
Yeah, the entire encryption debate right now is a big hot topic, and the government is not real fond of getting locked out of things that they want access to.
Right.
So they're fighting this rather vehemently. So what we're going to look at today is more having to do with the connections between what happened in Pensacola, and we're going to ask the question, are we seeing treatment of this event, the Pensacola shooting? Is it being treated in a manner that is consistent with other events that we've seen? And take a look at, is the FBI being forthcoming? There were supposedly 6 other people that they wanted to speak with. We want to take a look at that and find out, what happened there. Then see if we can weave a common thread across a couple of different stories. It seems that whenever Saudi folks get in trouble, things get swept under the rug or covered up or taken care of. And it seems that this has been going on for some time. One of the viewers sent me an email with a link about a story of a murder in Oregon. And one guy who was part of the story was a Saudi guy in Oregon, and he was acquitted or let go, or they dropped the charges.
Wow.
And yeah, the guy on the left. And he was acquitted, or the charges are dropped, and he's off the hook.
It's amazing.
And this story got a bunch of press. This is a number of years back. I forget if it's 2015 or 2013. But this was a big story back in the day. And if you look up that guy's name and you Google him,
What's up with this
guy?
guy?
And let's see let's see if we can find some articles about him.
Probably not.
Because this
right?
is just another example. And this is a guy who's in his 20s, and State Department says it won't intervene after manslaughter. And this was February 2019, so that was just a year ago. But I think it's an older story. They're showing the SUV that helped him get away.
Here we go. Here's the
couple other aspects here.
WAPU.
Right.
So it seems Saudi Arabian.
So this.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so again, this type of story, this scenario, continues to play out, and I want to take a look at how do you break through this, right? And who is pushing to break through this? And that's what I want to take a look at 6:30 for our Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're going to be talking about live today. And I've got a whole bunch of articles and video clips and stuff that we're going to take a look at.
Yeah. Now, so just to touch on what we were discussing last week, John, you pointed out some things, evidence that was in plain sight all along that hadn't been addressed. I thought you raised some really excellent points. There were some viewers, particularly viewers who were shooters, who disagreed with some of your hypotheses. First of all, it's important for people to know that every guest who comes on the show presents their information, their views. I don't tell guests what to say, what not to say. People can tell me they're going to unsubscribe, they want me to depixelate things, they want me to do whatever they want me to do. I will never tell John Cullen or any other guest what to say. Guests who come on the show are free to present their points of view, and their points of view are their own. Oftentimes I do agree with guests that I have on the show, but there are points that we disagree on, and that's the case with John, that's the case with every single guest. I think that John's overall conclusions with regard to the Las Vegas shooting are the most compelling that we've heard from anyone, and I think that there were some things that he said last week that were speculative that might have been correct, might have been incorrect. John has more experience with firearms than I do, but obviously there are military veterans out there, there are police officers who got in touch with me who said, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I'm not listening to anything. So what I would encourage people to do is to evaluate each piece of information on its own. And I think that if John says he feels that the guy not having eye protection means he didn't shoot in the room, that's not what his entire conclusion is based on. It's one tiny little element. I thought one of the strongest things that John had presented last week was this tannerite. He helped me personally gain a better understanding of what tannerite is, what it's used for. Got into a lot of debate with a lot of different viewers about would someone blow something up with tannerite? And John even showed us some videos where entire barns and cars and things were filled with tannerite. But my takeaway, not being an explosives expert, not being a firearms expert, and also after reviewing the tannerite website, it seems to be intended for, like, you fill a can with it, you put the can 1,000 feet away and you shoot, and then it explodes and you realize that you've hit the can. It's not necessarily intended to be like C4 or dynamite or something for demolition.
No,
so that's highly
that's
suggestive.
Right. It's recreational. It's a recreational product. That's
not
right.
a
It's a recreational
terrorist
product.
explosive. And then the other strong point that John had raised is that if he was going to use it to blow up the hotel or blow up the jet fuel tanks or something, wouldn't it be in place at the time that he was doing the shooting? So, I mean, there were things that we discussed last week that were stronger than others, but I think it's also important for people to realize that there's nobody else who's been drilling into this investigation with as much detail and for as long as John has. So with anything like this, you go down a road and sometimes you hit a dead end and you come back and you change the theory and you abandon certain things. John, anything you want to say about some of the stuff that was said last week?
I think that there's people in the audience, I think there's folks in the audience that may have a hard time differentiating between evidence and speculation.
And proof.
Right. So the first thing we do is we put the evidence on the table. Right. So the evidence on the table, for example, is there's 5 room keys on the countertop. That's just a fact. Right. There's no speculation there. There's 5 room keys. We see them. We can count them. Right. Everybody's pretty good at counting to 5.
Right.
Everybody's in agreement that there's 5 of them. Then comes the speculation. The speculation is, well, might there be 5 room keys because Laura, Katie, and Joanne are also registered to the room? Well, I don't know. I'm not saying that that's definitive. So I think that a lot of the folks in the audience make the mistake of thinking that some of the things that we talk about, that I'm saying it's definitive. I don't know anything definitive except what I see a photograph of.
Right.
And even then, sometimes it's hard to tell.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So very little of what I put forth is definitive. I put forward, that's why I call it a hypothesis, right? The hypothesis can be modified. It can vary. It hasn't in a big way. There's been some minor modifications to it. But for the most part, the hypothesis has stood since November 2017.
Right.
And again, this is why I didn't really want to get in front of the camera and in front of the microphone. I just wanted to let the evidence do all the talking.
Right.
My speculation about what this could be, what this might be, what do I read into the fact? So let's talk about eye protection and ear protection. For anybody out there, whether you're a cop or not a cop or military or not military, if you've gone shooting and you don't wear ear protection, well, now you wear hearing aids. Or you're hard of hearing, right?
Well, so but John, sorry.
This isn't. There's no gray area here. There's no gray area. Nobody shoots without hearing protection.
Well, some people
unless you shoot with a silencer on.
Some people said that they were hunting and they were outdoors and they. Yeah, sorry, we've got a problem with the microphone there. Some people were saying that they're shooting outdoors and that therefore they didn't use ear protection. This guy was inside a hotel room, an enclosed space. Then people argued, well, if he's suicidal, he wouldn't wear ear protection. To that argument, I say, okay, let's set aside the ear protection thing. It's not the strongest, most compelling point. It was an item that John raised that seemed to strengthen the notion that Stephen Paddock was not there to shoot out the window of the room. It was another tiny little piece of evidence that was suggestive that something else was going to happen. Other people
Correct.
didn't like the
Correct.
point you raised that the FBI wouldn't give them consumer guns, they'd have military guns. Again, I don't necessarily agree with that. The FBI could get whatever kind of guns they want. I do
So
agree
this is okay. So
with the
again, this is
totality.
the speculation versus the evidence, right? So the evidence is that all of the guns in the room are 223. Period. That's not debatable. That's a fact. All of the guns in the room, other than the AR-10s and the Savage 308, so the are 223. In other words, there's no 5.56 NATO guns, and there's no 7.62 NATO guns. There's an AR-10. Or two AR-10s or three AR-10s, but the rest are AR-15s that are chambered for 223, right? So then the speculation is, if this was a Fast and Furious thing, wouldn't we see more military-oriented weaponry? Possibly. I'm not saying that we would. I'm asking the question: would we see more military-oriented weaponry if this were a Fast and Furious thing than the type of weapons that you can go buy at a local gun store? And they're all different, right? I would assume if I was doing a deal with the ATF or the FBI or the CIA and some backdoor gun running thing, wouldn't 20 guns be the same? Each and every one of them is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, again,
Again, I don't know.
Yeah.
But people thinking that I'm saying something that's definitive, I think people were misunderstanding the approach. The approach is look at the evidence, and then does the evidence tell us anything? And might we derive something from it? So when I look at evidence, I look at it and I say, is this telling me this? And is there other evidence that corroborates it? And that's what we were talking about last time. There's 5 room keys, and then in other footage, we hear that there's 3 women registered to the room. Well, did those 2 things jive with one another? They might, but it's not definitive.
Yeah, and the Jack Mac 55 is telling us the AR-10 is 308. I don't want to debate that right now because I don't know what it is, what it isn't.
That's right.
The thing that I liked,
the AR-10 is
John,
308, and what that again, it's a civilian version of the weapon. There's military versions that shoot the 7.62 cartridge.
Stop. I don't want to get into 7.62, 308, all that. The thing I liked that you brought up last week was this overall notion that the totality of evidence and the condition of the room was more suggestive that Paddock was preparing to take a group of people out into the desert to shoot targets. Perhaps they weren't licensed to use these guns. Perhaps he wasn't licensed to book this type of trip. And if somebody said, hey, we know these Saudi guys who are coming into town, they want to pay you $100,000 to go out into the desert and try every different type of gun, that would make sense for having 27 different guns there. And that would entice the guy to go there. They're going to pay him some amount of money to do something illegal, not kill 50, 60 people, but just do something a little bit on the edge that a sketchy guy like this might do. I do believe that what you presented last week was supportive of an alternative theory, that Paddock was not involved in a gun sale thing to ISIS. He was not involved in a Fast and Furious thing. He was planning a trip to load 5 or 6 guys into his minivan, drive out to the desert, and shoot up a bunch of tannerite. I like that theory, and it makes sense.
That's what the evidence suggests, but again, it's speculation. So for the audience, this is not definitive. Nobody's saying, damn it, this is what happened. And if you think that's what you're hearing, you need to talk to somebody. Okay?
And then again, I mean, everybody's got their...
What you're hearing us say is the evidence that we see in front of us is indicative of this scenario. It's less indicative of a federal-based gun-running scenario where I would expect the weaponry would be a little bit more military-oriented and less civilian-oriented. Now, I could be wrong, right? But it's not a definitive call that we're making here. We're, the research that I did and the conclusion, the hypothesis that I came to, I published the final thesis November 2017. And it was the listeners and the viewers that said, please don't stop. if you stop covering this, it may not get covered.
Right.
And so I made a promise that I wouldn't stop. But the net of it is that the hypothesis hasn't changed because there hasn't been enough evidence to change it, right? So let's take a look at a couple of these comments here and see if we can address these in the last couple of seconds here.
Yeah, we're almost out of time.
Yes, Jason Clayton is saying it takes a high-velocity bullet to make tannerite go off. That's correct. A sub-supersonic bullet, like a pistol, won't ignite tannerite. You have to shoot it with something like a 223 or better. So that's absolutely correct. And then this guy's talking about blackout, and that's too technical.
Well, that's what I wanted to get to, John, real quick. Because there's a lot of people who take shooting very seriously, and obviously everybody who comes to the show, either as a guest or a viewer, has their area of expertise, and some people even have a particular detail that they might be very focused on, and it's totally valid for people to debate that. But if John says something is a 5.56 and a 2.23 and a 3.08, that does not affect the overall hypothesis, which is that there does seem to be a preponderance of evidence suggesting that Paddock had no idea he was going to be shooting or getting shot or doing anything in the hotel room other than preparing a bunch of guns. And I hate to be rushing, but I knew we had a lot of stuff we wanted to talk about, and we are just about out of time. We want to get over to patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and the 2 Subscribestar channels. I did just now briefly show the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. I would definitely encourage people who are new to the show, people who are just seeing John for the first time, get over there to John E. Hoover, subscribe to the channel, and go back to some of the previous videos. Look at the helicopter evidence. Look at the extensive evidence that John has put together on this whole overall case. And John, I want you to know you have my support. I really do think you've been digging into this thing like nobody else, and you've been taking a lot of flack for it, so I appreciate you having the fortitude to stand up.
I don't really notice the flack, so that's okay. Again, I see what I see, and I call it as I see it, and if I'm wrong, that's okay. There's plenty of stuff I've been wrong about, right? So just a week or two ago, we discovered that thing that we thought was a drone taking off from the venue was not a drone. It was a speck on the lens. So, it's okay to be wrong. What's not okay is to not look and to not investigate and to not dig.
Right.
And if you see something, you say something. And that's what I believe in. So
absolutely.
Looking forward to going a little bit deeper at the bottom of the hour.
Absolutely. And I want to thank all of our generous sponsors. They make this show possible. And if you're watching these YouTube segments every week, if you love what we're doing, and even if you love coming in here and telling John and I all kinds of negative things about each other, if you're coming back week over week, you should become a sponsor and join us on Patreon and Subscribestar. That's what keeps the show going. That's what keeps this information totally free of the financial influence of, say, doing your research at the Bill Gates Research Building at Carnegie Mellon, or having your advertisers be MGM Grand or something like that. So thanks to all the generous sponsors. We'll see you guys on Subscribestar and Patreon in just about 5 minutes, so catch us there. Thanks for watching, everybody.